sheer pleasure to invite you all. It's only because of your encouragement that we have been able to continuously bring to you world-class experts. And when I'm saying the word world-class expert, I'm very mindful of what I'm talking about. I'm not just loosely using this word world-class experts. I know what I'm talking about. And you're going to experience what I mean by a world-class expert, especially in the domain of coaching. So, ladies and gentlemen, for the benefit of people who are attending it for the first time, Coaching Matters interview series is an initiative to help and support the coaching community, not only in India, but worldwide. Yes, we are actually going worldwide. We bring experts from various walks of life to share their wisdom, their experiences, their expertise around coaching to elevate the overall coaching experience. It is to showcase the value, the importance, the relevance of coaching in today's world more than ever before. Coaching Matters touches the various facets of coaching and how it connects with our day to day life. So, if you are a homemaker or you're a business owner, if you're a manager or a leader, if you're already a practicing coach for in house teams, or you're an external consultant, coaching is becoming a language to reckon with. And for this, especially for this eve, because we are just touching the Christmas Eve, I was thinking that who could be the person who could actually add a lot of value? Because as we're just stepping into new world, as we're stepping into the new year, there's a lot of baggages that we have been holding for. We have been holding, right? Because 2020 was not at all an easy ride for all of us by any means. Few of us lost our family members. A lot of us lost businesses. We went through our own twists. We went through our own turns. We already are carrying certain bruises. We already are carrying certain wounds. But nonetheless, we are marching ahead. So let me just take this opportunity to thank you for trusting us. We started this journey in the year 2020 only, and we have been able to bring world-class experts to you every second and fourth Wednesday at sharp 7:30 p.m. India time. And we've had the pleasure of having few of the best leaders who people swear by. These are the leaders who have written papers. These are the leaders who have written books. They are the authors. They are the keynote speakers. And they are known for the authority that they bring in the domain of coaching. One such leader that I have followed for quite some time, and I take pride in saying that every time when I've spoken to him, I could actually connect with him, not only as a colleague, not only as a professional, but as a human being as well. And for all those people who know me, you know that for me, connecting at the human level is really important. I might not be the best person, I might not be the smartest guy in the room, but for as long as I'm able to connect with the person at the human level, I'm happy with that. So one such person that I'm going to introduce to you, he's Karl. And let me just first introduce Karl, and then I'll tell you about a little bit about Karl. Karl combines around 3,500 plus hours of coaching, of executive coaching, with a long and extensive experience in corporate HR leadership roles for groups like AXA, British American Tobacco, Ernst& Young, and Sappi Fine Paper Europe. In the year 2014 is that's where when he started to go independent and start his own company and joined otolithconsulting.com as a partner. He has been a community of practice leader within the International Coach Federation for 6 years. Also for ICF, he's a subject matter expert contributing to the development of team coaching core competencies. That's what is in the news these days, isn't it? He's also a credentialed assessor of coaches seeking an ICF credentialing. He's a member of ICF Professional Coaches Nominating Committee, and he lives by his mission, that is trigger and guide leaders through transformations. He's a master certified coach, ladies and gentlemen. And I remember my first conversation with Karl, where I asked Karl, the word otolith, I've heard it for the first time. What does that mean? And he said something that I said, you know what? I really need to bring him to the community because I know what he's talking about. And he said, otolith means a small part of a system, a small organism that ensures that uh, everything is in equilibrium. I was very curious. Hey, Carl, tell me more about that. And that's where he started speaking. He said, Gaurav, do you know those small thing in an organization, that small department in an organization, that one person in your team, when he's there, he's not even visible. When she's there, you don't even notice her. But when she's not there, you experience the absence. I said, wow. And that's where the conversation went on for almost like 2.5 hours, I remember, where we were trying to connect dots that how does coaching relate with Otholic? And what is the connection, that how can we actually help people to identify what that small thing, when it's there we don't even notice, when it's not there we experience that absence. And that is what the initial conversation that I had with Carl, and where he was talking about otolith. So ladies and gentlemen, it's my sheer pleasure and an honor to welcome Carl, where we are going to discuss today that coaching the top performers is a myth. And this is really interesting because for the longest period of time I've been talking about, and we have been doing a lot of work with the high potential high performers in different teams, and we've always take pride in saying that, you know what, we work with so and so organization, we work with so and so organization, and we take false pride. We actually take it somewhere or the other. I know that I'm speaking from my ego when I'm sharing with somebody that, you know what, with so and so organization we are working with the top performers. But the question is, when you're working with the top brass people in an organization, what kind of impact is it creating for the complete culture? And that is where we are going to dwell in. That's where we are going to dabble with. That's where we are going to get into discussion. Now, before I ask the first question from Carl, here is a request. So in case you've got any comment, please write it down in the chat box. However, in case you've got any question, because after some time, at the end of 45 minutes, I'm going to stop and I'm going to ask questions. I'm going to pick up questions from the Q&A. If you look at the extreme right hand side on the bar, just left on the left towards the leave, you'll find Q&A. If you've got any question, just type in there. So ladies and gentlemen, sheer honor, please join your hands together and welcome one of the master certified coaches that I've got great admiration from. Trust me, I'm not only talking about the great coach that he is. He runs several communities. I'm sure you would have come across a community called ACC, PCC, MCC credentialing, right? He's the man behind it. Similarly, he's running several communities on several social media platforms. So it's a sheer pleasure to introduce to you a very dear friend, somebody that I could connect with at the very first conversation, a great human being by heart, and of course, a master certified coach. Carl, thank you so much for accepting our invitation and being here. Such an honor to have you here.
Wow, Gaurav, what an immense welcoming. um, Let me, before starting, also thank you, Gaurav, and also thank your entire team and Shalini for the great preparation and organization that we went through together so far. In these Corona days, it will not surprise you that in the last 8, 9 months, I've run pretty much from webinar to webinar. Everything turned to be digital. And I must say that I've been deeply impressed as a coach and as a human being by the warmth in our connection, and also by your professionalism in terms of preparing and organizing this. It is for me an honor to be present here. I see that there's quite a large crowd.
We have
That
over 150 people right now, and
Yes,
there are more people joining in because we have got total 500 registrations for this
wow,
event. Yeah.
wonderful, honored and grateful, Gaurav. I'm totally ready for you.
Thank you, Carl. Thank you so much, Carl. And I can see the questions popping in already. So we will take the questions, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you so much for all the encouragement. And there is one gentleman who's saying, hey, Gaurav, just come to the point. So my dear friend, we are coming to the point. My apologies. I've taken a little more time introducing Carl. My sincere apologies. So Carl, let's look at the first question, and we are going to demystifying this statement, right? So coaching the top performers is a myth. So here's my first question to you. Why do you feel coaching the top performers is a myth in an organizational context?
Yes. Yes, yes. Well, I've been coaching quite some executives in the last 10 years, performers, top performers, people that were supposed to be high potentials, the others that were not, but hoped to be. And what I've learned is that this often happens in a certain atmosphere of mystery, methodology, call it whatever you want. And it has got more to do with the atmosphere around it, the context around it, than with the coaching of those top performers themselves. There seems to be a kind of a human atmosphere, a human context around coaching top performance that makes it into a mythology. And I've been really become interested, almost intrigued by that. What makes that around the journey of a top performer being coached? What exactly makes that around that journey? This seems to be sometimes a quiet and an informal, sometimes even emotional atmosphere
Hmm,
that makes it a little bit mysterious sometimes, honestly. And that's in fact what triggered me into this title.
hmm, hmm, hmm. Okay. So how does it fit in when you look at the organizational context?
Yes.
So is
Yeah.
it formal? Is it informal context that we talk about? So
Well,
what's your take on that?
it is both. In some organizations, you have a very clear vision and a philosophy on coaching. We
Hmm.
will come probably later back on that in other questions, but in some organizations, it's all pretty clear. It's all pretty transparent. For some top performance, coaching is even integrated in a standard way of working. When you are promoted to leadership level X, huh? automatically, automatically, we offer you coaching programs because we think that it is good for you. And there you really see it is integrated in a vision.
Hmm.
But there are also consequences of that. And those consequences are what I call the informal atmosphere. Imagine, Gaurav,
Hmm.
that you and I are colleagues, and I see you having a discreet conversation with your boss, which is also my boss. And afterwards, I also have the same conversation with my boss. Okay. And afterwards, we remain silent. But a few days later, I meet you at a coffee machine and you start sharing with me, listen, Karl, I've always trusted you as a good colleague. Actually, my boss shared with me that I would be invited to a coaching journey because clearly it's appropriate for my way of functioning now.
Hmm.
And I have not been invited for a coaching journey. And there it starts. My boss did not touch that subject,
Yeah.
although my last evaluations were also good. I know that you received the exceed and I only received the succeed for my evaluation. Yet I believe that I'm doing pretty well, but still it touches me a bit. It is a bit painful to me to hear that you have been invited and that I have
Hmm.
not been invited. And that's
Yeah.
where it starts. That is
Yeah.
where it starts. That is
And,
where we shift from professional vision on coaching into mysterious atmosphere.
hmm. So I think that's where it impacts the human relationship.
Yes,
So whether we
absolutely.
talk about the trust part of it or we talk about the conversations, I will start hiding things from you. I would not be shared because I know that you're
Absolutely.
going through this journey and my own insecurities would take over. Is that a fair assumption to make?
Yes, yes. You need a solid context of leadership,
Hmm.
trust, of safety in order to share those things with each other and also to continue trusting your leadership
Hmm.
when you are not invited or perhaps not invited yet. Uh,
Got
And
it.
that's where you see that. Well, in German, they have a beautiful expression, das Menschliche allzu menschlich. In English, the human remains a human after all. And that's where you very clearly see and notice that in
Hmm. Hmm.
organization.
Hmm. 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 Yeah. So before I dwell into what are the other things that we need to take care of when we are working with the top performers, here's another question. Since, Carl, you have been in the space of coaching for the longest period of time. There was a time when coaching was considered as a remedial tool,
Yes.
right? And now coaching is considered to be a developmental tool. At that point in time, in years back, right, almost like a decade back, I remember when we started coaching in India, and every time when you'll say that this person has been given a coach, people will look at him with squeezed eyes and say, there's something wrong with him, he's not a performer. And fast forward 10 years, 15 years, this person has been given a coach, do you know this? And people look at him with a lot of dignity, a lot of pride. Now, when you spoke about the informal human atmosphere, what do you see? What has shifted in the last 15 years' time?
A lot, luckily. When I look to my own country, that is Belgium, and I compare it with the country north of us, which is the Netherlands. And when you go back about 10, 15 years in time, I think it's fair to say that at that moment in the Netherlands, they said, when you have no coach, you have a problem. And in Belgium, they said, when you have a coach, you have a
Then
problem.
you have a problem. Absolutely.
Well, I repeat that still 15 years ago. There's been an immense evolution. And I believe that from looking at coaching as a cure for a sickness, a cure for a remedy, and sometimes even offered in desperate ways, we truly do not have a clue how we could help him. Let's find a coach. We have been evolving to a vision on coaching that is much more proactive, that is much more integrated in a larger development strategy in companies. Not in all companies yet, but when I look at my experience over the last 10 years, it is a manifest pattern that I can observe that coaching is no longer a thing somewhere in the clouds, only offered for the ones with whom we don't have any further ideas yet, but it clearly has become a much more proactive tool that is offered as a part of adult learning.
Beautiful.
That is offered as a part of an integrated development toolkit, together with training, together with learning by experience, together with so many other things.
Yeah, the 70-20-10 principle.
Yes, indeed.
Yeah.
Well, to elaborate shortly on that, from the 100% that we learn, I believe it was Charles Jennings who made a framework on that a few years ago. From the 100% that we learn, 70% we learn by doing our work, by making errors, by learning from our errors. 10% we learn by formal class training. So you go to a school, you go to a training, and in a formal way, you get knowledge transacted. And very interesting, between that 70% here and that 10% here, there's 20% in the middle that is called coaching and mentoring, which actually combines both of them. If I make a lot of errors in my daily work, well, if I got no one who gives me feedback now and then, who coaches me now and then, who mentors me now and then, well, I can make as much as errors as I want. I'm not going to learn from them if nobody gives me coaching, if nobody gives me feedback.
Yeah.
And that's and so those organizations that have learned to integrate those three ways of learning in a more or less integrated strategy, those are the ones that use coaching in a successful way.
Beautiful. And I have a question around that. But before that, let me just take a pause and restate for everyone's benefit. So what we're discussing right now is that if you don't have a coach, there is a problem. If you have a coach, there's a problem, depending upon the atmosphere that you are living in. And also, just to revisit, is coaching is considered as a remedial tool in the atmosphere that you're a part of, or is it considered as a developmental tool? That's one. The second thing, which is extremely important every time when we are just getting into coaching the top performers, if we are unless we consider the organizational context, unless we are aware of the human informal atmosphere, it's not going to help, because more than adding value to the top performers, it's going to drain away a lot of potential from the system because of the dissonance it's going to create in the atmosphere. So Carl, that's an absolutely great input. Thank you so much. Now, here's my first question to you. So since we are talking about the 70-20-10 rule, we are talking about the human informal atmosphere that one is operating from. So how would you know that if this individual needs coaching, why not you, as you spoke about experimentation or putting him in on some other project or put him in the 70% or the 10%. So how would you know that this individual needs coaching at this point in time?
Well, every sustainable coaching journey
Hmm.
starts with decent intakes, high
Hmm.
quality intake. So a conversation with the boss of the coachee himself or herself, and also preferably with someone from human resources, just to have a first sense of how their vision on coaching is. And then actually I start questioning, I start exploring what is the real coaching topic, and or the topics, and quite easily you can have a list of, yes, what seems to be blocking within the person himself.
Hmm.
Are there any convictions that seem to be counterproductive? Are there any biases here that seems to be counterproductive? Is there a mismatch in values, the
Hmm.
personal values of the person and the organization values? Are there any mismatches that
Hmm.
I can sense in the person himself that are clearly not helping him? That's the first area. The second area is what I call, well, these are more structural problems. Again, it's no use coaching only your coachee when the boss above him or the colleagues around him clearly produce a very toxic environment.
Hmm.
I'm still going to accept that coachee
Hmm.
to work with, but there will come a moment that I'm going to take some advices to the larger organization and saying it's no use to just focus on this micro context of my coachee.
Hmm.
We refuse to look at the macro context around him.
Hmm.
So
Hmm.
to discern whether a person needs coaching, that is quite easy to do. That you can do in an individual intake. But to see what
Absolutely.
is going to be sustainable, you also need to have a macro look on the
Macro view of the organization. Yeah. So here's my next question then. So before you even accept a new client, so when we're talking about the micro view and the macro view, micro is when you're working with this or with this individual, right? In the context, in the atmosphere, as you mentioned, the in the human informal, formal atmosphere that you're working with. How do you even gauge the vision of the client? And when I'm talking about the client, I'm not talking about the individual that you'll be working with. I'm
Yes.
talking about the organization,
Yeah.
right? So how do you gauge the vision or what that client is expecting or hoping from the coaching engagement? How do you gauge that? Because
That is a really interesting question, Gaurav. Thank
hmm,
you. Um, Actually, what I'm interested in is not so much hearing or seeing some kind of slide deck
hmm,
where the company has clearly
hmm,
written down their vision on coaching. So I'm not so much interested in seeing executive coaching as one of the bullets on a slide that embraces the entire vision of the company. No, I want to have a conversation, preferably with the HR director, if possible with the CEO, if possible with other members, where I can clearly sense the way that coaching is practiced. So I'm interested in hearing some stories, successes, but also failures. What has been the actual existing experience with coaching
hmm.
within that organization? And on which levels? That is what I'm really curious about. And they can forget about the slide deck. That is what I want to have touch and feeling with.
Yeah. As I'm just listening to you, what reminds me is there's something when we do leadership development work or when we work with the organization to create the coaching culture, we talk about what is the narrative in the organization,
Yeah.
right? What is it going on? What people are talking about? How do they look at each other? And then we look at the internal and the external part of it, right? And the external, what we talk about the culture of the organization. On one hand, you may want to look at the policies and the processes and what is written on a piece of paper, as you were talking about the slide deck. But what is more important is what is the narrative going on in the culture, how
Well,
people are responding to each other, how people are behaving with each other.
you need in fact both.
Yeah.
Whenever there is something called a professional human resources strategy, a people development strategy, elaborated on a long-term vision. Normally, coaching will be part of that, and coaching will indeed be somewhere on a slide deck, and there's no problem with that. But it's no use when the processes or the policies or the strategies only have a live in theory. Huh? They also need to be
Yeah.
practiced.
Yeah.
And I am much more enthusiastic about accepting a coachee when I've heard stories, when I've heard testimonies about coaching as a living practice in the organization.
Yeah.
That both together, they make it ideal.
Yeah. So, that makes me shift the gears now. So there's a friend of mine, his name is Paul Lawrence. He does a lot of work in the space of team coaching as well as systemic coaching. Something he said that stayed with me. He said that there was a time when coaching was considered from a linear lens, that this is the cause, this is the effect. But the more and more we are just getting into coaching and the way it's impacting the organization, what we are realizing is that no coaching can be complete without looking at the systemic view of that. Now,
Exactly.
here's my question then: why what you're talking about right now, the micro and the macro view of the coaching, without understanding the narratives and without understanding the client's vision and what he or she is hoping or expecting from the organization, why aren't we challenging the impact of environment on that top performer, so-called top performer? And that's where also connecting it back to what you were speaking about, the human informal or formal atmosphere, right? So what do you think? What is the impact of environment in a coaching assignment?
Well, I believe that it is well, my duty, my responsibility
As a coach?
as a coach
Wow. Okay.
to challenge to challenge what I call the macro environment, to challenge the entire organization and its leadership on structural problems, on toxic leadership, on toxic architectures that they may not like to hear, but that are realities and that are impacting the quality of individual coaching work. I'll tell you even more, Godav.
Hmm.
If I coach 3 persons from the same department, and
Hmm.
if I clearly see that they they come demotivated over and over again to the next coaching sessions because what
Hmm.
they've did in between the coaching sessions has not contributed to their development.
Hmm.
I think it's my responsibility to, to give somewhere a sign to the organization. Listen, fellas, I'm grateful for the coaching mission, but just be aware that they're not going to have any sustainable impact because the rest of the organization is too toxic.
Hmm.
And I believe it is my responsibility as a coach to find ways, and of course, totally respecting all confidentiality and discretion of my deontology, but
Hmm.
to find ways to make that clear to the initial mandate givers, HR, the top leadership, to say, listen, I can coach, if you wish, 5 more people of that department, and you're going to pay my invoice, but unless you also have a look at the larger context, I think that continuing individual coaching alone is not going to be very successful.
What an insight. Thank you so much, Carl. Carl, this reminds me of a story I often share in our coach training program. There's a small child who's walking in a park with his mom. And while they're walking, the small child is holding the finger of his mother and walking and enjoying the sunshine. And while it's doing that, the small child looks at a caterpillar. The caterpillar is struggling and trying to flutter and break those wings and come out and become a butterfly.
Mhm.
Looking at that caterpillar, that small child stops there and breaks the shell of the caterpillar.
Mhm.
And to his surprise, the caterpillar dies.
Mhm.
And he starts to cry and he's sobbing and sobbing and sobbing. He looks up at his mom. He said, Mom, the caterpillar has died. The intention was only to help him, but it has died. And the mother looks at the child and it says, next time when you come across this situation, Don't do anything. Don't break the shell. Just be there. Just watch it out that no external entity or a particle steps over that caterpillar. They continue to walk. Now, this small boy is in deep thoughts, continues to work on how could I do that? My intention was only to help that caterpillar. The
Mhm.
next time, as they walk another extra mile, they find another caterpillar. Now, this time, the caterpillar is in the same situation, struggling to come out of the wings. And this time, the small boy stays there, stays there, and stays there, just to ensure that the environment is supporting the caterpillar. And after some time, the caterpillar breaks the shell and comes out of that is a butterfly.
Mhm.
And he looks at the mom and he's extremely happy with a brimming smile and the shine on his face and the twinkle in his eyes. And the mom says, what's your learning?
Mhm.
The boy says something. I'm not going to share that with any one of you. Right? But the point is, what you're talking about is that it is what I'm listening is that same responsibility of a coach to impact or influence the environment. Is my understanding right?
Yes,
So,
for many reasons. Yeah.
what do you think? How can I, as a coach, influence the context or the atmosphere that where the individual is, so that it is beneficial
Mhm.
for the client to, for the individual to perform better? How can I influence?
Well, I'm going to respond on this one with a kind of dry economic response. If we as a coach do not, on a regular basis, inform our clients on the more structural uh, problems in their organizations, toxic
Hmm.
environments, toxic behavior, toxic leadership, the sustainability of our program, individual coaching programs, can no longer be guaranteed. And so
Hmm.
it means that people are going to pay us for our coaching of which we as coaches will sometimes know that, well, I can coach here the moon out of the sky, but it's not going to impact sustainably. So I have already lived
Hmm.
it a few times that I have literally gone with a file with data to my client saying, thank you that you let me do some coaching work here. By the way, if we want our collaboration to be fruitful and sustainable at the long term, I
Hmm.
believe that we should also have a look at this. And actually is a kind of data and proof on how problematic certain leadership behavior is in their organization. And
Hmm.
then I propose, well, it is only useful to continue individual coaching if we simultaneously can do something about the larger leadership context. And that's a matter of economy. That's a matter of even figuring the cost of it.
Hmm.
When
Hmm. So it's not about working at the micro level, it's also working at the macro level. So
absolutely.
as a coach, how can I be mindful that how much coaching is isolated and how much coaching is integrated, right, in the system? So here's my question then. How would you define or where would you draw the boundary of a coach and a coaching engagement or a coaching assignment? And how can that be addressed? Because somewhere or the other, I as a coach, I need to define, draw that boundary for myself as a coach and as the coaching assignment that I'm part of. So how would you address that?
Mhm. Um, well, I think it's from an introspective perspective, and it's got to do a lot with making the shift from the from the micro to the macro environment. Huh? And somewhere in between, there is a mental wall. So where you have to consider for yourself as a coach, here my assignment as an individual ICF credentialed coach stops, and here I may need to switch to consulting or to advising roles. Um, Designing a new architecture for a coaching culture, designing a new training program for top leadership is something else than coaching. So there, I believe that from a vision point, there is a switch between the micro and the macro environments where you have to, for yourself, be very aware when you leave the one for the other. And from legal contractual perspective, I think when you observe that what needs to be done is no longer individual coaching alone, but larger consultancy, for instance, that's the moment to propose another kind of service. Huh? And I believe that there, the ICF framework and our deontology can be very helpful to assess ourselves and to correct ourselves when we when we come to these borders. When you come at a moment, then you have to say to your coachee, listen, I would really like to give you the advice to say to your own boss that he needs coaching. Then you have a very serious breach of your deontology and also of your coaching contract. So you shouldn't go there. That's something that you need to address directly with the top leadership.
Yeah. You know, Carl, you've been involved with ICF in so many practical ways, right? You've been a part of the nominating team. You've been a part of designing the team coach core competencies. You've been an assessor. Now let's change the gears. And here's my last question before I start taking questions. There are so many questions already in the Q&A, and there's so many comments already. Now, this is the last question. When we're talking about the boundaries, when we're talking about we should not breach that element of this is where my boundary is like. So what do you think? What makes a masterful coach that makes all the difference? Not only at the micro level, but the macro level. Not only for the individual level,
Yes.
but for the organization as well. Let me give you one context here. Currently, I'm working with a country head of an automobile company. This gentleman was heading the operations for another company. Now he's settled in India, handling Indian operations and the operations of a couple of other countries, four more countries, right? The person that he reports into is the global CEO, right? I had this conversation with the global CEO where the global CEO as well as this gentleman, they are aligned towards a goal that they would like to address. Now, as this gentleman has started to work, what he's realizing is there are a lot of other forces which is not allowing him to do his work. And that's where, as I'm talking to you, as I'm listening to you, what I'm seeing right now is as much as I'm working with this micro level, there are certain change and the shifts required at the macro level as well. And that reminds me of the kind of work that we do when we talk about the adaptive leadership, right? So chunking this huge question down, as a coach, what differentiates a masterful coach from a mediocre coach? That makes all the difference for an individual and for the organization.
Well, the terminology of masterful versus mediocre, I, I would prefer to reformulate that into being on a journey. I think that when you grow into masterful coaching, you are more and more capable of integrating, yes, integrating all possible things that happen within the coachee, within yourself, within the organization, that you are able to integrate everything that happens and to give it back to your coachee. I think that when you are starting as a coach, you are very busy alone with capturing what your coachee is saying. So if I would use a metaphor, the difference between let's say, experienced coaching and masterful coaching is that an experienced coach is very much busy with conversing with his coachee. It is a matter of asking questions, listening, asking questions, listening, asking questions, listening. When you make the shift to masterful coaching, it is not so much anymore about conversations. It is much more about capturing with your entire body, here, here, and in your stomach, capturing with your entire body what is happening in the moment. What do you sense that is happening with your coachee? What do you sense happening with yourself? And sharing that with your coachee, giving it back to your coachee and saying, well, this is what I believe, what I sense that is happening at the moment. What is it doing with you? And that requires, Gaurav, that you shift from converser to what we call an antenna on a television. Yeah, you capture everything and you give it back to the coachee.
So well articulated. Thank you so much, Carl. I'm sure you know Dorothy. Dorothy says that how can you use yourself as an instrument for
Yes,
development for the others, right?
yes,
And in today's
totally.
program, I was leading a program today where we were talking about, hey, don't listen only with your ears, listen with your eyes. Listen
Yes.
with your body, and don't only listen to what is being said, listen to what is not being said. So, with that, Carl, thank you so much for great articulation. I think what you shared is like amazing. I love the uh, metaphor of as you're moving from converser to an antenna is like what is capturing the different frequency all around me. So here's this question. Thank you so much, Neetu, for asking this question. Brilliant question. So here is a question for you, Carl. How well does an organization take the feedback from the external coaches, from the external coaches? Brilliant question. Over to you.
That's a good one. Well, it depends on how you formulate that feedback. It depends on how well you know the client. And so when I'm just encountering a new client and I have my first coachee within that new client, of course, I'm not going to come immediately with the French Revolution to the top leadership. I will very gently, very diplomatically start to make my point. I will also ask, how prepared are you to hear something more than just quite sec reporting on the coachee's journey? I will listen to their preparedness of hearing and listening to other elements that I'm bringing to them. If so, I have it occurred a few times in my experience that a top CEO said to me, actually, no, Carl, I prefer that you manage that individual coachee as an individual program, and I have no further interest or no further passion to listen to other things that you say. So I have no further ambition to learn from you what else might be happening in my organization. Well, okay, it is what it is. It is a pity for both parties, and you know, in that case, that you will not do more than that one coachee only. Well, okay, it is what it is. And now I tend no longer to accept these kind of missions. I used to
Hmm.
do that 10 years ago, but I do no longer do that. So you have to seek a balance in what feedback you give and how you give that. And usually it takes me about half a year to a year
Hmm.
to sense what I can and what I cannot tell to them, and how I can and how I cannot tell it to them. And then I'm talking about challenges that I observe that are not directly linked to the coachee, but that are relevant for the entire organization.
Brilliant. Thank you. So here's the next question. I'm sure you're going to love that because the other day when we were talking about, you were talking about if you're coaching somebody who's at the top performer, who's on the top of the echelon, what's happening is there's nothing happening at the bottom of the pyramid, right? If you're coaching people only at the bottom of the pyramid, then we are creating a
Mm.
dichotomy. We are creating a wall,
Yes.
right? So here's the next question. Vijay, thank you so much for asking this question. So Carl, here's the question. How coaching the top performers different from coaching others who are considered non-performers? Are the top performers receptive to coaching? So these are two questions. Let's pick up the first one. How coaching the top performers different from coaching others who are considered non-performers? Over to you, Carl. I'm sure you're going to love that.
Actually, I don't want to shock anybody, but the coaching itself is not different. I'm in front of an entire human being that I totally respect as a coachee. So the coaching is not different, not from my perspective. But there we go again. The way that the organization looks at the coaching of the both of them may be different. The way they look at themselves may be different. Huh? And so I've already had a few times the question, well, quite frankly, Carl, I do not understand why I need a coach. Aha, oops. And there you know that, well, intensive take-in is going to be needed in order to define the teams, the topics, but also the preparedness of being coached. In other cases, I had, well, it's not me, it's my boss who needs a coach. Aha, interesting. And there you go again. And the most painful thing, and that refers a bit to the question, is, aha, the fact that I need a coach is that a sign of me being assessed as a top performer, of not yet as a top performer? And there you see again that world of emotions and disappointments, etc., coming in. So the coaching itself is not different, but the way of looking at it can be different. And there again, it is your responsibility as a coach to have a high quality intake, but also to scan the environment around it. That is absolutely key.
Yeah. Thank you, Carl. Now, here's this question. I'm sure you're going to love this as well. So, Himani, thank you so much for asking this question. And in fact, if you remember, Carl, I asked you this question long time
Yeah.
back, right? So, when you're switching from micro to the macro, when we are coaching only the individual, and when we are getting to a space where we are looking at the systemic view of the person, right? How would you switch practically, right? So what are those 2 or 3 points that you would suggest that could allow a coach to move from the micro view to the macro view? And I would rather bring another perspective and come back to the micro as well, because you cannot move from micro to macro and stay there, right? You have to move, you have to be at the dance floor, and you have to be at the balcony as well. So what are those 3 steps that you may want to do? Come to the dance floor, dance, go back to the balcony, look at the view, what's happening. So what are your views on this?
A first step is a feeling of necessity. I have already been in situations where I sense in every molecule of my body that it makes no longer sense to continue the individual coaching of a coachee if I do not simultaneously take care of the larger environment. That is giving some feedback whatsoever to higher leadership of 2 human resources. So it is a simple feeling of necessity. You can no longer continue doing your work if you first taken care of the larger context. A second feeling is responsibility. And that is, we already talked about that, for me, very important. As a coach, you can choose. You can say, guess what, Carl? Just do those 6 sessions, send your invoice, and
Move on.
get rid of it.
Wash off your hands.
There I think, no, I consider it my personal responsibility, and that's a personal choice, to whatever the impact on the individual journey, to go to my larger organization, to go and have a chat with HR, to go and have a chat with top leadership, say, listen, fellows, in all politeness and professionalism, I think you really should have a look at those and those aspects, because otherwise I think that all further investments are not going to bring what they should. And so that's the first thing that drives me to the macro aspect. And the third one, and that's the image you already used, Gaurav, is imagine that you are in an organization where only at the bottom one is doing some coaching. You have some line managers at the lowest hierarchical level, and they do some coaching, which the employees or the hand workers. And the more you go to the top of the organization, there's no coaching anymore. Imagine the disaster, Gaurav, that you are a top performer somewhere over there that seems to need a coach. But here in the area on the top, nobody is coached and nobody is coaching. Man, that must be an isolated feeling. That is
Precisely.
upfront doomed to not to work. And from those 3 perspectives, the necessity, the responsibility, and the ways coaching is integrated, I go back to my individual coaching.
Absolutely.
And there I try to clarify what is needed to make it for him successful.
Makes sense. And that's where I said, right, it's the responsibility of a coach to keep it isolated as much as to integrate that as well, right? So coaching has to be isolated, at the same time it has to be integrated. Now, the next question, moving on, Nirupama, thank you so much for asking that question. Khan, I have my views, but would love to hear your views before I jump onto that. It says, how do you identify an uncoachable person and how to manage them? What are your views on that?
Well, I may break through some taboos now, but that's our job as coaches too. For me, there's no such thing as an uncoachable person. My most deep inner belief is that everybody can be coached. This being said, we may also have to coach him on his conviction of
Absolutely,
not
bang
being
on.
able to be coached. It is possible to first spend 2, 3, 4 sessions on the question, well, what is coaching? How sure are we that coaching is what you need? How sure are we that you are not coachable? How sure is your boss that you are not coachable? What is the precise context of this journey? But I believe that for a healthy person, if other medical problems require other kind of interventions, it's our job to refer to other experts.
Brilliant.
For a healthy person, I believe that there's no such thing as a non-coachable person.
Brilliant. I thank you so much for validating it. That's exactly what I believe in. There's nothing called uncoachable person, right? And when there's nothing called uncoachable, the question is not whether the other person is coachable or not. The question is, are you ready as a coach? Because just bringing another perspective in this conversation, different people vibrate at different level of consciousness. Are
Yes.
you ready to coach a person? Are you ready to meet that person where the other person is? Right? And different philosophies talk about that unless you meet that person where the other person is, you will never be able to coach him or her. And that's where, rather than judging that this person is not coachable, it's time to introspect. Hey, what's in me which is not allowing me to coach this person? Or what skills do I need to imbibe in myself? Or where do I need to get ready? Before I move to the next question, Carl, and ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you. Just keep on pouring the love that you're pouring. Continue, continue. That's love for me, right? Keep on pouring. Keep on pouring. Thank you. Fantastic. Thank you.
And,
Now,
and, and you call me a great community builder.
thank you. Thank you so much, Carl. Okay, so let's look at, we have got questions from different parts of the world. Here is a question by Eric. Eric, thank you so much for asking that question. So the question for you, Carl, is this. What are some of the indicators that alert you as a coach that you should consider switching from coaching to consultation?
Ah, that's a great question. Well, it happens. It has happened already a few times in my experience that clearly continuing to ask questions does not help. And it has already occurred, and believe me, these are not very pleasant experiences, that becomes a little bit embarrassing. So when you ask your coachee several questions on a topic and you continue to invite them to explore it from very various perspectives, exploring the reality of the coachee, and when you observe and when you sense that coachee really is not capable of answering, is not capable of thinking or exploring or enlarging his awareness, this can sometimes become truly embarrassing. And those moments, I think it is my job to say, listen, dear coachee, I've been inviting you now for half an hour, to reflect on this, to enlarge your awareness. I do not get the impression that we are making progress. What do you think? And what happens then in those cases, oh, Carl, I'm really glad that you mentioned me. What I need here is advice. I really need someone telling me here what I should do, because truly I don't know, and I don't know what to answer on your questions. Well, that of course switches the entire setting, and then you have permission to, well, to start consulting and to start advising. But it can also sometimes come from me if I think after 2, 3 sessions, well, okay, we've made some progress, but I believe that another way of intervention would be appropriate. Then I propose that myself to the coachee. So I think that for those aspects, another way of help would be more convenient. What do you think? And well, it's as simple as that. You simply switch.
So what I'm listening is it's okay to switch the hat for as long as you've been able to serve the organization, right?
Yes, but
You know,
you should be very clear on that. Sometimes I use various hats. Dear coachee, hat number 1, this is a coaching session. And after an hour, there coachee, I start
Precisely,
advising now.
precisely. Yeah. So same analogy that I often share is that when you're driving from one place to another and just imagine that your car has conked off, you will just pull out your toolbox and depending upon the issue in hand, you're going to pull out that tool from the toolbox, right?
Yes.
So thank you so much, Carl. So let me just thank all of you. Thank you so much for asking so many questions. Unlike 2020, 2021, I promise you it's going to be very peaceful. It's going to bring a lot of good health, harmony for everyone's life. So, right. Thank you so much, Carl, for your trust, for accepting our invitation. Thank you so much, everyone, for all your love. Every time when you come here, it's a validation that there are so many people who are so encouraging. Thank you so much for all your love, for all your encouragement. And we promise, we commit to you that we'll continue to walk this path with sincerity and commitment to build a community so that we can elevate the overall coaching experience, not only in India, worldwide. Carl, thank you so much. May you be safe. May you get a lot of happiness, prosperity, good health in the years to come. Carl, thank you so much for your
It was a
wisdom and
pleasure,
experience.
Gaurav. Thanks a lot. Thank you, everybody. Bye-bye.
Thank you so much, everyone. Please register the event in case you have not yet done. Looking forward to meet you all. Take care. Stay blessed. Bye bye.